A Trip into the Darkness, Chapter 21. The walk back to the car felt like she was walking in a haze. Everything around her seemed to vibrate and hum. Opening the driver's side door, she got into the car and set her jars down. There was no way in hell that she was going to be able to drive at this point in her life. The humming in her ears was so loud, and everything around her seemed to be melting. What an odd sensation, she thought. Leaning her seat back, Mallory closed her eyes. She was supposed to be going somewhere, but she felt so stoned and disconnected from reality. Her body was relaxed, and she felt tired like she had not slept in days, which maybe she hadn't. It was with that thought that she allowed herself to drift off into a peaceful sleep. Tilda. Jerking awake, Mallory glanced around her car and found it was still dark outside. Sitting up, it took her a minute to realize where she was. Last night felt like a dream, somehow stumbling into a vampire's den and being instructed to travel to Brazil. Reaching up to her throat, she froze when she felt the cold amulet at her neck. It had been real. Rubbing her eyes, she tried swallowing, but her mouth was so dry. Glancing around the car, she found the water bottle that she had taken from Katie's Jeep yesterday. Grabbing it, she took a deep drink and then glanced at her jar of blood. Just a few sips a day, Monique had told her. Feeling nervous, she unscrewed the lid. When the smell hit her, she was overwhelmed with the desire to drink it all. Instead, she very carefully managed to only take a sip. Twisting the top back on, she set the jar down and looked for her pills. After slamming a handful of those into her mouth, she unscrewed her jar of herbs and loaded her glass pipe that Monique had given her. Lighting the herbs, she inhaled the sweet, musky smoke, and soon a light buzzing feeling returned to her body, making her feel more relaxed. Lighting a cigarette, she decided she was ready to drive. Looking at the clock on the dashboard, she found it was only about 2:30 in the morning. Pulling out onto the street, she saw there were still no cars around. Looking at her GPS, Mallory contemplated what exactly she should look up. Were there directions to the Mexico border on the GPS maps? That seemed entirely too vague. No, she'd need to find a location of a border town. She realized what she really needed was a hard copy map, since she did not have a phone to search for things. Reaching up to the GPS, she typed in Texas. She knew she would have to cross the border somewhere within that state, and after she acquired a map, she'd figure out more details. Hours later, the sun finally came up. Stopping at a chain store, Mallory parked and got out of the car. She was going to find a map and hopefully some shoes. It was still early in the morning, but the store was open and there was already too many people walking around. Mallory did her best to ignore everyone and went to the clothing section first. She grabbed a pair of socks, a few pairs of underwear, a white t-shirt, a navy blue flannel, a gray baseball cap, and a new pair of jeans. Next, she found a black pair of Converse shoes. Making her way over to the book section of the store, she found a map of North and South America. It had the names of the towns and would serve its purpose well for figuring out what city to go to next. It even had blue lines on the map stating the names of the rivers. She easily located the Amazon River in Brazil. Standing in the middle of the aisle, looking at South America, she felt disbelief. How the fuck was she going to travel through all those little countries after she made the long trip through Mexico? If she was lucky, maybe she could find a boat in Mexico and just sail to Colombia. Then she'd only have to face 3 exceptionally large countries and could skip the 5 or 6 smaller countries in between that she'd have to travel through on land. She wondered if it was even humanly possible to get to the Amazon River in as little as a month. A small, logical part of her mind was screaming no. There was no way, but all things considered, she had no other available options. She had to try. She was dying without Troy's blood, so she might as well die trying to save herself. That is, if there is even an actual cure for her problem, located in the jungle of the Amazon. Another part of her warned that the madwoman she had talked to last night was just sending her on a death trip. Mallory reached up and touched the cold amulet again. She felt it whispering to her that together they could make it anywhere and that they would destroy anything and everything that tried to stop him. The thing felt alive and wanted her to take it far away. Wishing for the best, Mallory loaded her large map up and started walking toward the food area of the store. She grabbed a few bags of jerky along with a couple of gallons of water. With her arms full, she made her way to the exit. A man at the cash register called out to her, and Mallory turned to look at him. His heart loudly skipped a beat before she spoke. "Do not try to stop me. If anyone asks, I paid for this stuff." Making it back to her car, she dropped her loot into the passenger seat before typing into the GPS Laredo, Texas. Just over 660 miles, and if she drove nonstop, she should be there in about 10 hours. As she drove, Mallory hoped that she had read the map correctly and that Laredo was indeed a border town. It was right on the American-Mexican border, so surely there would be somewhere close by for her to pass through customs. She had never left the country before, so she didn't really know what to expect. When she stopped for gas, Mallory grabbed her change of clothes and went to the bathroom to clean herself up some. Stripping down, she put on her clean socks and black underwear and followed with the white t-shirt. She pulled on her new jeans and replaced her black hoodie with the flannel shirt before putting on her new shoes and the hat. After braiding her tangled hair, she threw away everything that Troy had originally given her. She felt remade with the change of clothing and her hair out of her face. Leaving the bathroom, she could feel 4 humans walking around the gas station with her. In a hurry to get away from their scents and their beating heart, she grabbed a few slices of pizza and ran back to her car. Once inside, she struggled to see through the red haze of her bloodlust. Glancing at the passenger seat, Mallory loaded some herbs into her pipe and smoked it with a lighter that she had stolen from the gas station. It smelled and tasted exactly like the smoke in Monique's place. After a couple of hits, she felt relaxation seep into her, and the car seemed to hum. She still had 6 hours of driving left ahead of her, and she settled in for the rest of her trip. Finally reaching Laredo, her tank was empty and her mouth was throbbing. She had smoked more herbs while she drove and had taken more pills, but she still felt ravaged. Pulling into a gas station, she parked and looked around. It was an overly busy station, and that had been the reason she picked it. As she watched people come and go, she tried to decide who she was going to feed from. She would get fuel and blood, and then she was going to find the border and cross into Mexico. It was still bright outside, so attacking someone would be more obvious. She did not want to kill anyone. She had been able to control herself with Mike and Katie when she bit them. Maybe she just needed to seduce someone, that way their sexual pleasure distracted her enough not to kill them. Deciding that would be the best course of action, Mallory waited for her victim. When a guy pulled up in a pickup close to hers, she decided she had found what she was looking for. He was a tall, burly man with a large brown beard and brown eyes. He didn't have a wedding band on either. Not that it would have mattered, but Mallory did have some standards. Getting out of her car, she slowly walked up to him, and he smiled. He took one look at her, and she thought he had really pretty teeth. "Hey, do you want to come sit in my car with me?" she asked him. "Yeah, we can do that," he said without any hesitation. Nodding, Mallory turned around and got into the driver's seat. The guy made his way over to the passenger side and slid inside, then looked at her. Sitting in the sealed-up car, she could smell his blood and hear his accelerated heart. He was excited and turned on. His masculine energy was emitting from his body in surges. In the past, he would have been someone Mallory would have brought home from the bar. Staring at him, she prayed that she wouldn't kill him. Sliding across the center console and into his lap, she straddled him, and her teeth lengthened in anticipation. The guy immediately grabbed her hips and bucked underneath of her. A small shiver ran down her spine as his energy slammed into her body, and his hard cock rubbed against her pussy. "You're perfect," Mallory whispered as she brought her head down to his throat. When she sunk her teeth into his flesh, he moaned loudly and started grinding his hips hard in between her legs. His blood sadly reminded her of how Mike's had tasted. Stale beer from the night before, but it was feeling. After a little time of pulling at his neck, she felt his body jerk, and he muttered "fuck" before his release tore through his body and slammed into hers. It was strong enough to make her break the hold on his throat. Leaning down, she slid her tongue over his wound, and his skin sealed itself. The guy was panting and still holding onto her hips as she moved off his lap and back into the driver's seat. "Thank you. Would you mind filling up my car for me? I have no money," Mallory asked him as she lit a smoke and rolled down her window. "Of course," he replied in a hoarse voice. With her tank full, she watched the man open his mouth to talk to her, but instead of waiting, Mallory put the car in drive and drove away. She followed the road signs towards the border and found customs. There was only one vehicle ahead of her in line. When they pulled through, Mallory drove up to talk with the guard. He had been wearing a scowl when she pulled up, but like every other human she had met, his face changed when he looked at her. I need to go to Mexico. If you'd just go ahead and give me the green light, that'd be great. Nodding, the man reached over and pushed a button, which caused the gate to open for her. Huh, thanks, Mallory said as she drove through. Other guards looked at her while she passed, but none of them tried to stop her. She did it. She was in Mexico. First time ever leaving the country, and here she was, driving into unknown lands without a clue in the world what to expect. Would there be gas stations down here? Were there roads leading all the way down to the other countries? Would she be able to find someone to feed from every night without speaking their language? With that thought, irritation went through her. She should have looked up a book on Spanish to English translations. Why hadn't she thought of that? How was she going to get what she needed when she did not know the words to ask? Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that she had taken 2 semesters of Spanish during her freshman year of college. She had struggled greatly, but had learned a ton. Surely it would all come back to her once she was around Espanol speakers. I'll figure it out, Mallory told herself as she followed the road deeper into Mexico.